How's it going, people? Salmon Slabber here, and this is episode 4.2 of Runescape lore. In the first episode, we covered the overview of what happens during the Second Age, and kind of gave you a general idea of everything that happened during this time. In episode 4.1, we covered Zaros' actions throughout the entirety of the Second Age. Well, to close this off, we will now cover what Saradomin did during this time. Although Saradomin was largely inactive during the Second Age, he did do a few things and kind of prepared towards the Third Age, where he then became incredibly active. So, let's get some information about Saradomin himself. So Saradomin is the god of order and wisdom. He's often associated with light as well. He's one of the most worshipped gods on Gielinor. His past, however, contrary to his association with light and goodness, is very dark. He was known to be one of the most destructive gods, having waged war upon the peaceful Naragi race and annihilating the entire realm. Today, however, Saradomin has a vast number of followers, most of which believe that he is the god of good. There are far more churches dedicated to him than to other gods throughout the entirety of Gielinor. Most of his modern followers reside mainly within Misthalin, Asgarnia, Kandarin, and Intrana. But there are several groups outside this area. Unlike those of Zamorak or Guthics, Saradomin's followers consist almost entirely of humans. Though that was not always the case. So what is Saradomin's symbol? Well, Saradomin's symbol is usually depicted by a four-pointed star, and is normally gold or silver. Now, the origination of this symbol is actually unknown. We can't be certain. However, it is theorized that he got his symbol from the Elder Crown that he's had in his possession for much over 10,000 years, or at least it's theorized he has. So let's get into Saradomin now, when he actually arrived in Gielinor itself. There's a bit of contradicting information about who came through the portal at this point, but when Saradomin eventually arrived on Gielinor, the portal he came through was actually on the island of Intrana. This is why every Saradomin follower have always considered the island to be the holiest place in all of Gielinor. Now, this is likely theorized that Saradomin actually arrived through this portal with other gods. However, which gods in particular were uncertain, though it is theorized that Armadyl and Zaros came through the same portal. However, Zaros, as we know, went to the Dragon Rider realm to gather some troops, and they came through the King Black Dragon's lair, or at least it's theorized they did. So it's highly believed that Zaros may have actually come in through that portal over in the Varinthi side. However, Armadyl may have actually come through this portal in Intrana. According to Guthics, Saradomin wears a crown, an artifact made by the Elder Gods that allows him to sense the presence of other artifacts made by the gods. Therefore, it's assumed that Saradomin actually came to Gielinor sensing the three Elder artifacts that Guthics discovered within the First Age. These three artifacts were the Stone of Jazz, or the Eye of Saradomin as Saradomin likes to call it, the Staff of Armadyl, and the Elder Horn. Soon after the gods arrived in Gielinor, they started to conquer all the lands and started annexing local areas around themselves. Saradomin's biggest known settlement at the time was the massive city of Halovale. Now, Halovale was one of the most productive cities during the Second Age. Although Zaros' empire was vastly superior in land and size, Halovale itself may have actually been the precipice of mankind during the Second Age. Halovale was a mighty city inhabited by the Ician and humans. They were ruled by Queen Ephorete and King Acertes. Halovale still exists today under the name of Mayadich. Intrana remained under the control of Saradomin through the entirety of the Second Age, and a fortress was also built on Dragontooth Isle, just east of Port Phasmatis. It's also believed that Saradomin may have actually conquered certain areas throughout modern-day Asgarnia, as Zaros' armies were trying to fight back. So Saradomin may have actually tried to push to gain control of areas near Falador, and it is known that Zaros and the Saradomin army did clash multiple times throughout the Asgarnia region. In the Second Age, Saradomin had a strong alliance with Armadyl, surprisingly. Not many actually knows about this. Whether this friendship actually started before or after their arrival in Gielinor is actually unknown. For reasons currently unknown, Saradomin appeared to be on bad terms with Zaros, who ruled the mightiest empire throughout the entirety of the Second Age. However, it is theorized that Saradomin may have actually not disliked Zaros so much, but actually feared him, as when Zaros entered, roughly around the same time as Saradomin, he started to annex regions all around himself and actually gain control of a massive amount of power very quickly. This, the threat that Zaros poses, plus sheer intimidation by his power, may very well play massive parts on why Saradomin is on general bad terms with Zaros. It may not necessarily be because he doesn't agree with him, but more along the lines that he was intimidated by Zaros' power. Towards the end of the Second Age, the Zarosian general and the Majora, by the name of Zamorak, started to make plans to overthrow his master. Many of his fellow Majora actually sided with Zamorak, and Saradomin sent spies to Zamorak's base of operations in order to keep an eye on him. At this time, when the Staff of Armadyl, an extremely powerful artifact owned by the god Armadyl, was taken by a Saradomin follower named Valdez, he wanted to take the artifact to Saradomin. However, through a series of unfortunate and accidental actions, which some Saradominists played a major role in, the staff fell into Zamorak's hands instead. With the power of the staff, Zamorak challenged Zaros in combat. This led to Zaros' banishment. Zamorak, who observed most of Zaros' powers, was banished as well by Saradomin and the other gods for banishing Zaros. Although it could be the fact that the powers transferred from Zaros to Zamorak basically induced fear within the other gods, and they immediately acted as banishing Zamorak from the realm. Although Zamorak later returned as a god himself since Zaros' banishment, Saradomin has done everything possible to cover up any and all information regarding Zaros, mainly to prevent Zaros from gaining followers again and thus possibly returning. So the fear induced by Zaros' power and foresight reduces Saradomin to trying to cover up everything, to eliminate all memory that Zaros existed. After Zaros' banishment, many of his followers sided with Zamorak, and the remaining Zarosian settlements were soon destroyed. The vast majority done so by Saradomin and Zamorak followers. However, after the destruction of the Empire, Zamorak turned against the other gods. This marked the beginning of the Third Age and the infamous God Wars. However, Sentistan and Gorak were the only settlements to survive many of the attacks of Saradomin and Zamorak. This makes Sentistan and Gorak the last Zarosian settlements of the Second Age that still stand today. So, during the Second Age, Saradomin didn't just sit idly by. He did, however, try to expand his areas throughout the Asgarnia region, pushing up from Intrana and trying to get a foothold within Rimidon, Port Sarim, and towards Falador. At the same time, he grew his massive empire, which was founded over in Hallowville, and became one of the most prosperous cities throughout the Second Age. And, towards the end of it, ended up banishing Zamorak out of sheer fear of the power of Zaros. So there we have it, that is Saradomin's actions during the Second Age. I hope you all found that a little bit interesting, because Saradomin surprisingly does actually do a fair amount. It's kind of behind the scenes stuff, but he does fight back, although not as grandiose as Zaros' empire. So, with that said, I hope you all enjoyed episode 4.2, and I will catch you all later. Have a good one.